Okay, so you know that feeling.
Right.
Like when you are just scrolling and scrolling through like all this endless self-help stuff,
Yeah.
all those articles, getting in those online debates about just the right way to live your life,
Right.
it can get kind of overwhelming, right?
Oh, yeah.
You sent us some really fascinating material
Yeah.
touching on exactly that
Hmm.
and pointing to one book that's definitely stirred up a lot of conversation.
Yeah.
Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life.
Yeah, that's right. And your sources are so interesting too because,
Yeah.
there's YouTube summaries and
Yes,
reviews, offering all these different perspectives.
absolutely.
And then a newspaper critique with, some pretty sharp insights.
Mm-hmm.
A blog post, with some really personal reflections.
Yeah,
I mean, it really paints this picture of a book that just,
it does.
resonates deeply with some
Mm.
and then draws some really strong criticism from others.
Yeah.
It seems like you're looking for a way to kind of cut through all that noise,
Exactly.
really understand what the core ideas are.
Mm-hmm.
What's all the fuss about?
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of people feel that way.
Hmm.
So consider this your personalized shortcut to figuring that out.
Yeah.
We're going to take all those sources you sent
Yep.
and really dig into, the key principles of 12 Rules for Life.
Okay.
And we'll also explore some of the major points of,
Yeah.
discussion and disagreement surrounding it
Okay.
to give you that clear understanding
Yeah.
without getting bogged down in a
Uh,
lot of the unnecessary detail.
I like it.
Okay, so let's jump right in.
Let's do it.
Rule number 1.
Okay.
Stand up straight with your shoulders back.
Okay.
Now, on the surface, this kind of sounds like,
Yeah.
posture advice your grandma might give.
Right. Exactly.
Right, like
Yeah.
sit up straight.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more to it.
Oh, yeah. What's so fascinating is how Peterson connects this really, seemingly simple physical act
Mm-hmm.
to our internal state.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the sources highlighted that adopting a really upright posture can actually trigger the release of serotonin in the brain,
Oh, wow.
which is a neurotransmitter
Right.
that's linked to feelings of confidence and well-being.
Yeah.
So it's not even just about looking more confident.
Right.
It can actually help you feel more confident.
Wow.
And that can create kind of an upward spiral.
Oh, interesting.
Imagine someone feeling really anxious,
Mm.
maybe their shoulders slump, their head drops. Unfortunately, that can reinforce those negative feelings.
Yeah.
But standing tall, on the other hand,
Yeah.
can be a small but powerful way to sort of interrupt that cycle.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
So it's like a physical cue to your brain to say,
Absolutely.
like, hey, things might actually be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that can have those knock-on effects.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so rule number 2, you send some sources on.
Okay.
Treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping. This one, I gotta say, this one made me kind of
Yeah.
pause and think for a second.
Yeah, it's really challenging to, like, our normal way of thinking,
Mm-hmm.
right? And your sources point out this paradox.
Mm-hmm.
We're often, so diligent about caring for other people.
Yeah.
Our pets, family members,
Right.
making sure they're eating properly, taking their medicine.
Yeah.
But then when it comes to our own needs,
Yeah.
we can be surprisingly neglectful.
Yeah, we really can.
And Peterson's argument, I think, from what I'm gathering from your materials,
Yeah.
is that this often comes from a really deep lack of self-worth.
Yeah.
So he's suggesting that we almost have like a moral obligation
Wow.
to care for ourselves with that same dedication.
That's a really interesting way to look at it. So it's kind of reframing self-care
Right.
from being, like indulgent
Yeah.
to being almost necessary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you're looking at yourself as someone you have a duty to look after.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, rule number 3.
This one's about connections.
Mm-hmm.
Make friends with people who want the best for you.
Right.
Now, this one seems obvious,
Yeah.
but I think there's a lot more to it.
Oh, there's so much more to it than just,
Yeah.
just the surface. And, it's not just about quantity of friends, but the quality of those relationships. And the
Mhm.
sources you provided really emphasize
Yeah.
the impact of our social circle.
Mm-hmm.
We are so influenced by the people that we spend time with.
Yeah.
So, surrounding yourself with individuals who are really supportive,
Mm-hmm.
who offer honest and constructive feedback
Right.
and who genuinely want to see you succeed is so important.
Absolutely.
And conversely, distancing yourself from
Yeah.
people who are consistently negative
Yeah.
or who seem to avoid taking responsibility for their own lives.
Right.
One of your sources even used this term friends audit,
Oh, yeah.
which I thought was great.
I love that term, friends audit.
Yeah, it's a really
It really is. concrete way to think about it.
It is a conscious evaluation
Yeah.
of who you're spending time with.
Exactly.
Okay, rule number 4 shifts the focus back to the individual.
Okay.
Compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today.
Right.
This one feels especially relevant
Yes.
in the age of social media.
Oh my gosh.
Right.
Yes.
You're constantly bombarded with everybody's highlight reel.
Yes.
Totally.
It's so easy to fall into that trap of comparing yourself to others
Yeah.
and feeling like you're always falling short.
Yes.
Right. So Peterson's advocating for this much healthier approach,
Mm-hmm.
focusing on your own personal trajectory.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So measuring your progress against your past self,
Yeah.
setting achievable goals,
Mm-hmm.
breaking them down into smaller steps,
Okay.
and celebrating those incremental improvements.
Yes.
You know, one of the sources put it as tending to your own garden
Yeah.
instead of constantly looking over the fence at your neighbors.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's about your own journey,
Exactly.
your own growth, not somebody else's.
Exactly.
Okay, rule number 5.
Okay.
I know this one sparks a lot of conversation.
Yeah.
Do not let children do anything that makes you dislike them.
Right.
You know?
This one gets right to the heart of it,
It does.
right to the heart of parenting and establishing boundaries.
Yeah.
The idea here is that children just naturally test limits.
Yeah.
It's our role as parents to kind of guide them,
Right.
you know, teach them what is and is not acceptable behavior.
Mm.
Essentially, preparing them to function within societal norms.
Yeah.
The goal isn't to, you know, suppress a child's spirit or anything,
Right.
but it's to help them develop into well-adjusted individuals.
Right.
And your sources also touch on the importance of, you know,
Yeah.
using only the necessary amount of force
Right.
when setting those boundaries and
Right.
focusing on really fundamental principles like respect and honesty.
Right. It's that balance between love
Yes.
and guidance. Setting limits that ultimately help the child in the long term.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, rule number 6 is another call for personal responsibility.
Okay.
Set your house in order before you criticize the world.
Mhm.
Really emphasizing looking inward
Right.
before pointing fingers outward.
Yeah.
Right? Addressing our own shortcomings,
Yeah.
our
Nope.
own personal chaos,
Mm-hmm.
before trying to fix all the problems of the whole world.
Exactly.
One of the sources said, if you can't manage your own household,
Yeah.
what standing do you have to critique society?
Exactly.
And I thought that was really powerful about, personal accountability.
Totally.
Okay, rule number 7 gets a little bit more philosophical.
Okay.
Pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient.
Right.
This one's drawing a distinction between, seeking that immediate gratification
Yeah.
and pursuing something with deeper meaning, something more fulfilling.
Yeah.
Right. And the argument here is that true meaning often comes from engaging with challenges,
Mhm.
taking on responsibility,
Right.
and contributing to something larger than ourselves,
Yeah.
even if it involves, some difficulty and sacrifice in the short term.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's about aligning your actions with your values.
Yeah.
Striving for long-term significance rather than just those
Yeah.
fleeting pleasures.
Totally.
One source put it really well. They said it's about choosing the path
Yeah.
that feels right in your soul,
Yeah.
even if it's not the easiest path.
Exactly. Yeah.
Rule number 8 seems straightforward on the surface,
Okay.
but I think it has really profound implications.
Okay.
Tell the truth, or at least don't lie.
Right.
And this extends beyond just, avoiding those falsehoods with other people.
Right.
It's also about being honest with ourselves.
Exactly.
Your sources highlighted that and the importance of that.
Yeah.
Because those internal inconsistencies,
Yeah.
when what we say and what we do don't match up, can create inner turmoil and anxiety.
Absolutely.
But if we cultivate and act in accordance with our own truth,
Yeah.
even when it's uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
that can foster a sense of harmony,
Yeah.
well-being.
Totally.
Okay, so rule number 9 shifts the focus to how we interact with others. Assume the person you are listening to might know something you don't. Now, this one really stood out to me because
Yeah.
it's underlining the importance of really, truly listening,
Yeah.
right? It's about approaching those conversations with humility
Absolutely.
and openness to learning, even if we initially hold a different view.
Totally.
One of the sources even pointed out that truly listening can help the other person to clarify their own thoughts, which I thought was so interesting.
That's so true.
And they suggested this technique of summarizing what the other person has said, just to make sure you've really understood.
It's a great technique.
Yeah. So it's about recognizing that, everyone has their own experiences, their own knowledge.
Totally.
So every conversation is a potential learning opportunity.
It really is.
Okay, rule number 10 gets pretty practical.
Okay.
Be precise in your speech.
Okay.
So this one is about linking the clarity of our language to our psychological state.
Interesting.
Because vague problems can feel so overwhelming and insurmountable.
Yeah.
But if we're specific in how we articulate those concerns, clearly defining what's bothering us, those problems can feel more manageable.
Yeah.
There was a great analogy in one of your sources about going to the doctor.
Right.
If you can describe your symptoms precisely,
Yeah.
that allows for much more targeted treatment than just saying, I feel unwell.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So specificity brings clarity.
Yes.
And that can be empowering when it comes to tackling challenges.
Totally. Yeah.
Okay, so we've reached rule number 11. And this one is probably
the most talked about.
The most talked about.
Yeah.
The most debated.
Absolutely.
Do not bother children when they are skateboarding.
Right.
Now, this one, as your sources pointed out,
Yeah.
isn't really about skateboarding.
No, not really.
Right. No,
it delves into Peterson's views on those inherent differences.
Right.
Particularly between men and women.
Mm-hmm.
He's arguing against enforcing that, strict equality in all behaviors all the time.
Right.
Suggesting that there might be some, biologically and psychologically rooted differences that we should probably acknowledge. This is a rule that has definitely generated a lot of discussion.
Yes, it has.
And criticism. Some interpretations suggested it's about, allowing for natural inclinations.
Yeah.
Not imposing those really rigid social constructs on how children play.
Right.
But it's definitely a viewpoint that attracts a lot of attention.
Well, it has, especially around gender equality and the potential for reinforcing stereotypes.
Yeah.
Okay, so finally we arrive at rule number 12.
Okay.
Pet a cat when you encounter one on the street.
Ooh.
Now, this one seems very simple, almost whimsical,
Yeah.
But
it's a good one. It's a little reminder to, appreciate those small moments of joy and beauty, even amidst all the hardship and suffering that we inevitably experience.
It's about being present.
Yeah.
Finding joy in the everyday.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've gone through the 12 rules.
We did it.
But your sources also brought up some broader themes that run through the whole book.
Okay.
And one that really stood out was dominance hierarchies.
Okay.
And this was often illustrated using the lobster analogy.
The lobsters.
Yeah, the lobster.
What's so interesting about this is that Peterson's arguing that these hierarchical structures are ancient. They're deeply ingrained in our biology, influencing not only how we carry ourselves physically, but how we're perceived and treated by others.
Yeah.
He uses that lobster analogy to demonstrate how even in a very simple nervous system, an individual's status within a hierarchy can affect their neurochemistry and behavior.
Oh, wow.
And it connects back to that first rule about posture.
Right.
The idea that how we present ourselves can have these tangible effects on our internal state and our social interactions.
Yeah.
But, it's also important to acknowledge that applying biological determinism too rigidly to these complex human societies does have its limitations.
Yeah, it's not quite that simple.
Right, exactly.
Another key theme was the power of narrative.
Yes, narratives.
Right, like the stories we tell ourselves and the world around us.
Yes, our sources really emphasize that we are constantly constructing these stories about ourselves and the world. And these narratives shape our perceptions, our emotions, our behaviors.
Yeah.
But the thing is, we have some agency in how we frame those stories.
Right.
By consciously choosing more empowering narratives, we can influence our sense of self and how we navigate the world.
Right. And conversely, clinging to those negative or disempowering stories can really hold us back.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So then there's the central idea of, meaning versus happiness.
Yeah.
Peterson really argues that pursuing a life filled with meaning, often through responsibility and contribution, offers a more profound and lasting form of fulfillment than simply chasing those fleeting moments of happiness.
Yeah, I like that.
Right. And your sources touch on the idea that life just inevitably involves some suffering, challenges,
Right.
and that engaging with those difficulties in the pursuit of something meaningful is ultimately what gives life depth and purpose.
Totally.
Now, his views on parenting also came up quite a bit.
Yeah.
And this seems to be a major point of discussion.
It is a big one.
Some sources highlighted, his perspective on children as potentially having these aggressive tendencies and the need for parents to, establish clear structures and boundaries.
Yeah.
But while emphasizing the importance of guidance and socialization, it's important to consider alternative viewpoints as well.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Which suggests maybe more nuanced understanding of children's behavior.
Right.
Okay, and then finally, the inherent complexity of the world.
Yes.
Right, this was another recurring idea.
Oh, absolutely. And your sources suggest that Peterson's arguing that, our minds often kind of simplify the world to make it comprehensible.
Right.
But that simplification inevitably masks a much deeper, more intricate reality.
It's more complex than we think it is.
It is. So this perspective really underscores the importance of intellectual humility.
Yeah.
Continuous learning.
Yeah.
Keeping an open mind.
Absolutely.
Because there's always more to understand than we currently do.
Totally.
Now, we can't really talk about 12 rules for life without acknowledging some of the controversies and criticisms that have surrounded it.
Yeah.
Both the book and Jordan Peterson himself.
Right.
He's often described as a very polarizing figure.
Yeah, he is.
Several of your sources highlighted his really strong views on various social and cultural issues. And his perspectives on topics like social justice movements were mentioned.
Right.
And his reluctance to use preferred pronouns for transgender individuals has definitely drawn criticism, which has led to accusations of, being out of step with current understandings of social issues. Yeah.
And then even the writing style of the book itself.
Yes, the writing
came under scrutiny in some of your sources.
Right. Oh, yeah. One reviewer described his style as really elaborate, even Baroque, often combining what they felt was a scolding tone with very abstract theoretical arguments.
Interesting.
And the sheer length of the book.
Yeah.
And the feeling that it sometimes meanders or lacks a clear focus.
Right.
Were mentioned as potential drawbacks.
Yeah.
One source even said it felt like several different books kind of loosely stitched together.
Yeah. And it seems some critics feel like he doesn't always practice what he preaches.
Yeah.
Like some sources pointed out instances where they argue Peterson himself doesn't always fully embody his own rules.
Yeah.
For example, they question whether he consistently assumes that his audience might know something he doesn't, or if his own language is always as precise as he advocates for.
Exactly, yeah.
The concept of straw manning was also mentioned, misrepresenting an opponent's argument, just to make it easier to attack.
Exactly.
Then there was the presence of those religious themes, particularly references to Christian theology and the Bible. And while he doesn't explicitly frame the book as a religious text, the frequent use of biblical stories and concepts led some to feel that it was implicitly drawing from a Christian worldview, which might not resonate with everyone.
Right, of course.
And some of the most pointed criticisms were about the book's perspective on gender.
Yeah, gender's a big one.
One very critical review argued that it really heavily promotes a very traditional view of masculinity and presents what they felt were flawed and even sexist viewpoints, citing examples like interpretations of male and female roles, views on women's contributions. And specifically, they took issue with what they saw as a dismissal of female perspectives. And reinforcement of those traditional gender hierarchies. So it's safe to say it's gotten a wide range of responses.
It really has.
But despite those criticisms, some of the rules really do lend themselves to practical application. Several of your sources highlighted those ways to incorporate these principles into daily life.
Absolutely.
For rule number 1, using visual cues like Post-it notes to remind yourself to check your posture.
Love it.
For rule number 3, taking the time to really evaluate those relationships, that friends audit.
It's a friends audit.
And for rule number 9, making a deliberate effort to practice active listening,
right,
and summarizing what others are saying.
Those are great takeaways.
They are. So
Yeah.
as we bring this deep dive to a close, what would you say are some of the key things our listeners should take away from this?
I think the core themes that come up consistently, regardless of individual opinions, are the emphasis on personal responsibility, the importance of actively seeking meaning in life, the impact of those social connections, and then the ongoing need for self-awareness and a commitment to personal growth. But it's undeniable that this book has sparked a lot of different reactions.
It has.
From deep appreciation to strong disagreement.
And it leaves me with this final thought for you, our listener.
Okay.
Considering this blend of seemingly straightforward advice alongside those more complex and sometimes controversial interpretations, what aspects of 12 Rules for Life, whether positive or negative, really resonate with your own understanding of how to navigate the complexities of life?
That's a really good question.
It's a question worth reflecting on.
It is.
And we encourage you to delve deeper into the aspects that have really piqued your interest, whether that means, reading the book itself, exploring more of Jordan Peterson's work, or researching those critical perspectives, because ultimately engaging thoughtfully with different ideas, even those that challenge our own viewpoints, is a really valuable part of that journey of learning personal development.
Absolutely.
So thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
Of course.
We'll see you next time.
See you later.